Amid the morning mist that hung over the mountain slopes, a woman named Laris heard a faint whimper coming from behind the wet bushes. She followed the sound and found a small puppy, its body trembling, eyes sad yet sharp, as if hiding something different. Her heart melted instantly. Without hesitation, she wrapped the creature in her jacket and took it home. But as days went by, Laris began to sense something strange. The pup grew faster than any ordinary dog, its fangs long, its gaze piercing, and its voice was not a bark, but a deep howl that shook the night. She didn't know that the creature she saved was not a dog at all, but the last forest wolf in that region, and so began an extraordinary story of friendship, loyalty, and loss. The morning fog was still thick when Laris walked alone, carrying a wooden basket on her back. In the middle of the silence, she heard a faint cry, like a lost baby. The sound came from the wet bushes near a small stream. Curiosity urged her closer, and there she saw a small, silver-gray puppy. Its body was dirty, its fur wet, and one leg wounded. Laris crouched carefully, afraid to startle the little creature. When their eyes met, she felt as though she was staring into something deeper than an animal. Without thinking, she wrapped it in her wool jacket and carried it home. Laris's steps left tracks on the damp soil, while far behind, two gleaming eyes watched from between the trees. A mother wolf stood still, staring at the human carrying her cub away. The forest seemed to hold its breath. That morning marked the beginning of a great change in Laris's life. Laris's home stood quietly on the forest's edge, surrounded by the soothing sounds of nature. She lived alone after losing her husband 2 years earlier in an accident. Since then, loneliness had been her only companion, but now life returned to the house with the presence of the little creature she named Bulan, Moon. Bulan adapted quickly. He slept near the fireplace and ate heartily. Sometimes, Laris felt as if she had a child again, someone to fill the emptiness in her heart. Every night, distant howls from the forest made Bulan lift his ears, as if remembering something lost. Laris only smiled, gently patting his head. "You're safe here," she always said. She didn't know that those words would one day become a heavy promise. Bulan grew faster than Laris had ever imagined. In no time, his body became large, his eyes sharp with a silver gleam under the moonlight. He began to run around the house with great energy, leaping over tall fences effortlessly. One night, Laris woke to a deep sound outside her window. When she looked, Bulan stood in the yard, with his head lifted toward the sky, howling into the forest. The sound made her hair stand on end. It wasn't a dog's bark. The next day, Laris brought Bulan to a vet in town. The vet stared at the animal silently for a long time, then said carefully, "Mrs. Laris, this isn't an ordinary dog. Are you sure you found it around here?" Laris looked at the vet in confusion. "What do you mean, not an ordinary dog?" she asked. The vet pointed to Bulan's skull shape and his long fangs. "These are traits of a gray wolf, but they've been extinct in this region." The words left her speechless. On the way home, her mind spun. A wolf? But Bulan was so gentle, so kind. She couldn't imagine him as a predator. Yet each night, his gaze toward the forest felt different, filled with longing, as if hearing a call that couldn't be explained. Laris tried to push the thought aside. To her, Bulan was still the little creature she had saved from death. She vowed to protect him, no matter what. Seasons changed, and Bulan grew stronger. His fur now shimmered dark silver, his body tall and firm, his movements quick as shadows. Laris often marveled at his intelligence. He could open doors, understand commands, even sense when Laris was sad. One afternoon, Bulan brought home a wild flower in his mouth and placed it at her feet. Laris laughed, tears in her eyes. "You're more thoughtful than most people, Bulan," she whispered. They were like a small, complete family again. But beneath that peace, the forest was stirring. Hunters began venturing deeper, searching for rare animals. Unknowingly, Bulan's presence had caught their attention. The wind blew softly that night, carrying the scent of wet leaves and something older, like a whisper of time itself. Bulan stood by the window, his eyes fixed on the dark tree line. Laras noticed how still he became, his fur bristling slightly as if hearing a call no human could. She stepped closer, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. "What are you looking at, Bulan?" she whispered. The wolf turned his head briefly, then looked back to the forest, his ears twitching. For a second, Laras thought she saw a faint shadow between the trees. When she blinked, it was gone. But the silence that followed was heavy, filled with something unseen. That night, Laras dreamed of the forest, of glowing eyes and howls echoing through endless fog, and in the dream, Bulan stood at the edge of two worlds, unable to choose. The following morning, a knock echoed at Laras's door. She opened it to find a man in a brown coat, his face rough, eyes sharp like a hawk's. "Good morning, ma'am," he said politely. "I'm looking for a large animal that's been spotted near here. Maybe you've seen it?" Laras's heart skipped. "An animal? What kind?" she asked, forcing calm into her voice. "A wolf," he answered simply. "Rare kind. Could fetch a good price for its pelt. Locals say they've heard it howl at night." She shook her head quickly. "No wolves here, sir. Only my dog." The man's gaze drifted past her shoulder to where Bulan stood in the dim hallway. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, then the hunter smiled thinly. "Beautiful animal you have there." He tipped his hat and left, but Laras's hands trembled as she closed the door. Bulan walked to her side, pressing his head against her palm. She whispered shakily, "I won't let them take you." Days turned colder. Frost kissed the tips of the grass and the moon grew bright and full. Laras often caught Bulan standing outside at night, gazing upward, his breath forming clouds of mist. He seemed restless, as if something inside him was awakening. One night, she followed him silently into the clearing behind the house. There, under the moonlight, Bulan lifted his head and howled, a sound both haunting and beautiful. Laras froze, tears filling her eyes. It was not a cry of loneliness, but of remembrance. For the first time, she realized how far apart their worlds truly were. Bulan belonged to the forest, to the wind and the moon, not to her. Yet as he turned and nuzzled her hand gently, she knew their bond was something words could never explain. Winter came early that year. The forest turned silent under layers of white, and the air grew heavy with tension. One evening, gunshots echoed through the trees. Bulan bolted upright, growling. Laras rushed to the window and saw faint flashes of light deep in the woods. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat. "No, Bulan!" she called as he leaped out into the snow. She chased after him, her boots sinking with every step. The sound of dogs barking and men shouting filled the air. When she finally reached the clearing, she saw a sight that froze her blood. Hunters stood over the body of a massive gray wolf, its fur matted with blood. Bulan howled from the shadows, a cry of grief that pierced the night. The hunters turned, startled, realizing too late that another wolf was watching them. The world blurred around her as Laras ran forward shouting, "Stop! Don't shoot!" The hunters hesitated, guns raised. Bulan stepped between her and them, teeth bared, his body trembling with fury. For the first time, Laras saw the wildness within him, terrifying yet magnificent. "Stay back!" one hunter yelled, finger on the trigger. Laras threw herself in front of Bulan. "No, he's mine! Don't you dare!" The man hesitated, eyes flicking between her and the creature that looked far from tame. In that moment, Bulan turned to her. His gaze softened, the fire fading. Then slowly, he backed away toward the forest. Snowflakes fell between them like silent promises. Laras's tears froze on her cheeks as she whispered, "Please, don't go." But Bulan only looked at her once more. then disappeared into the white mist, leaving nothing but paw prints fading in the snow. Days passed, yet Laras could not forget the image of Bulan fading into the snow. The house felt hollow, every corner echoing with memories of his presence. The sound of his paws, the warmth by the fire, the gentle thump of his tail. Each night, she left food outside the back porch, even though she told herself it was pointless. But come morning, the bowls were always empty, and fresh paw prints circled the yard. He was still there, watching. The forest no longer frightened her. It felt alive, as though part of Bulan's soul had become one with the trees. And when the wind howled through the branches, it carried a sound she recognized, a promise that he had not forgotten her. Winter turned to spring. Flowers began to bloom along the forest's edge, and the river melted into restless streams again. Yet even as life returned, Laras often felt unseen eyes following her whenever she walked beyond her fence. One afternoon, she found a half-eaten deer near the trail. A clean kill, no signs of struggle. Around it were the same paw prints she'd seen in the snow. She smiled faintly. "You're hunting again, aren't you, my boy?" That night, from her window, she caught a glimpse of silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. The wolf she once saved was now the unseen guardian of her life. It wasn't long before the nearby villagers began to talk. Livestock had gone missing. Strange howls were heard in the dark. "A monster's back," they whispered, fear heavy in their voices. When Laras heard them, her chest tightened. She knew what they spoke of, knew the truth behind the rumors. Yet if she defended him, they would never believe her. To them, a wolf was only danger, never devotion. So she kept silent, enduring their gossip and side glances. But inside, her heart burned. Bulan wasn't a monster. He was family. And if the villagers ever tried to hunt him, she would stand in their way. A week later, Laras saw men carrying ropes, iron traps, and guns into the forest. "The mayor ordered a hunt," one said. "That beast killed a farmer's goat last night." She felt her blood run cold. That evening, unable to sleep, she grabbed her lantern and entered the forest. The darkness felt heavy. Every step weighed with dread. She searched until she found one of the traps, an iron jaw hidden beneath leaves. She disarmed it carefully, her hands trembling. "Not this time," she whispered. But somewhere deeper in the woods, another trap waited, and fate had already chosen its path. The sound came near midnight, a sharp, pained cry that tore through the forest air. Laras dropped everything and ran, branches scratching her face, the lantern swinging wildly. She followed the whimpering until she reached a clearing lit by moonlight. There, caught in an iron trap, lay Bulan. His paw was bleeding, his eyes wide with pain and fear. "No, no, no." Laras knelt beside him, tears falling as she pried at the rusted metal. It refused to move. "Stay still, my love," she sobbed, using all her strength until the trap finally gave way. Bulan collapsed into her arms, trembling. In that moment, all she wanted was to take away his pain. But the echo of distant voices warned her. The hunters were coming. Laras tore her scarf into strips and wrapped Bulan's wound. "You have to move," she whispered desperately. Bulan growled softly, his body weak, but he pushed himself upright. The two of them vanished into the deeper forest, just as torchlight appeared between the trees. The hunters shouted, following their tracks. Bulan limped beside her, every step leaving a crimson mark on the fallen leaves. "We're almost there," Laras gasped, half guiding, half carrying him. Finally, they reached an old cave near the waterfall, a place Laras once visited with her husband. She hid Bulan inside, brushing the fur from his face. "Stay here. I'll come back." He licked her hand faintly, before his eyes drifted closed. When the hunters came to question her, Laras stood firm. "You won't find any wolf here," she said calmly, though her heart raced. "If you keep chasing shadows, you'll only lose yourselves." The men searched around but found nothing. One of them, The same hunter who had once come to her door gave her a long, knowing look. "Strange how the wolves' tracks end right by your land," he muttered. Laras forced a smile. "Maybe because I pray more than I hunt." The men laughed faintly, then left. As soon as they were gone, she sank to her knees. She had saved Bulan for now, but lies she knew never stayed buried long. Weeks passed. The wound on Bulan's paw slowly healed. Laras visited him every morning, bringing food and water. At first, he limped painfully, but each day he grew stronger. The bond between them deepened, silent yet unbreakable. Sometimes, Lara sat beside him for hours, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves. "You were born for the wild," she whispered, "but you always come back to me." Bulan rested his head on her lap, his eyes soft with understanding. In that hidden cave, time stood still. The world beyond, the hunters, the fear, the cruelty, felt far away. For those few stolen weeks, it was just them again, like before. The peace didn't last. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered, and rain began to fall in torrents. Lightning flashed, followed by the echo of gunfire. The hunters had returned. More of them this time. Laras ran to the cave, soaked and breathless. "We have to go, Bulan," she cried. He rose, growling, his eyes burning with fierce resolve. Together they ran through the storm, the sound of thunder mixing with the shouts of men. At the edge of a ravine, she slipped, tumbling down a slope. Bulan leapt after her, teeth gripping her sleeve, pulling her to safety. But as she looked up, she saw men above, rifles raised. "Run!" she screamed. The forest exploded with sound. Bulan darted between trees, leading the hunters away from her. Lara shouted until her voice broke. Then came the echo, one sharp gunshot that silenced the rain. She stumbled through the mud, her heart pounding. When she found him, Bulan lay still among the ferns, his fur stained crimson. "No," she whispered, collapsing beside him. His eyes met hers one last time, calm, peaceful, as if saying goodbye. She pressed her forehead to his, tears mixing with the rain. "Forgive me," she sobbed. The forest wept with her, thunder rolling like distant grief, and as his breathing faded, the wind carried one final howl, soft, eternal, and full of love. The world dimmed after that night. Laras barely spoke for days. The forest that once comforted her now felt like a graveyard of memories. Each rustle of leaves, each whisper of wind, carried echoes of Bulan's final howl. She buried him beneath the oldest tree near the ravine, the place where the sunlight filtered like stained glass through the branches. No cross, no marker, only wildflowers and silence. "You belong to the forest now," she whispered. Sometimes at dusk, she swore she heard footsteps behind her, soft, rhythmic, familiar. But when she turned, there was only emptiness and the sighing of the wind. The villagers rejoiced when the hunters came back with news. The wolf was dead. "The menace is gone," they said, raising their glasses. Only Lara stayed silent in the corner of the tavern, her face pale. The lead hunter, the man in the brown coat, looked uneasy. "Strange thing," he muttered to the others. "We found no body, only blood and tracks that vanished near the waterfall." That night, a cold wind swept through the village, rattling shutters and whispering through chimneys. The dogs howled without reason, and the hunter dreamt of silver eyes watching him from the dark. Laras could not sleep. Night after night, she dreamed of the forest bathed in moonlight. In the dream, Bulan stood at the edge of the trees, whole again, his fur gleaming silver. He did not speak, but she understood. He wanted her to follow, to walk into the woods and leave behind her grief. But when she tried, the forest grew endless, her feet heavy, her breath fading. She always woke before reaching him. One morning, she found a single white feather on her windowsill. It wasn't from any bird she knew. The sight made her heart ache and heal all at once. One afternoon, a little boy from the village knocked on her door. His cheeks were streaked with tears. "Miss Laras," he sniffled. "There's a wolf near the fields, but it didn't hurt anyone. It just watched me." Her heart skipped. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. The boy nodded. It looked sad, like it was lost. She smiled faintly and gave him a biscuit. "You're very brave," she said. After he left, she stepped outside and looked toward the fields. The grass moved gently in the breeze, and for a fleeting moment she saw it. A silhouette, silver in the distance, then gone. The next morning, Laras visited Bulan's grave and found something carved into the bark above it. 3 claw marks, deep and deliberate. Her breath caught. It hadn't been there before. She touched the grooves gently, tracing their shape. "You're still here, aren't you?" she whispered. The forest answered with silence, but the air felt alive, thrumming softly like a heartbeat. She placed fresh flowers at the base of the tree. The wind rose, swirling the petals upward like tiny spirits, and for the first time since that night, she smiled. Days later, a fierce storm hit the valley. Trees swayed, rain pounded the earth, and thunder rolled like the voice of an ancient god. Lara sat by her window, watching lightning split the sky. In one blinding flash, she saw him again. Bulan, standing at the forest's edge, his eyes calm and bright amid the chaos. She gasped, rushing outside, calling his name. But when she reached the spot, there was nothing but rain and paw prints in the mud. Yet the moment felt real, as if the world itself had opened briefly to let his spirit through. The storm passed, but its echo lingered in her bones. The hunter came to see her the next day. His face was drawn, his voice uneasy. "I don't know what's happening," he admitted. "I saw that wolf again. I swear it looked at me, not with hate, but pity." Laras poured him tea, her hands steady. "Perhaps you killed a body, not a soul," she said softly, "and the forest remembers the difference." He stared at her, searching for mockery, but found only sadness. When he left, he took off his rifle and left it leaning against her porch. From that day forward, no man from the village hunted again. Seasons turned once more. The forest flourished, its animals returning, its rivers clear and alive. Laras tended her garden, her hair now streaked with gray, but her eyes peaceful. Sometimes she saw pairs of wolves running along the distant ridge, wild and free. Among them was one whose fur shone brighter, whose gait she would recognize anywhere. She would wave, smiling softly. The villagers said the wolves kept pests away and never harmed livestock again. Some called it luck. Laras called it grace. At night, when the moon rose full, Laras often sat outside with her old shawl wrapped tight. The wind would sweep through the trees, carrying a faint, familiar sound, a low, mournful howl that made her heart swell with warmth instead of pain. "Sometimes," she whispered back, "I'm still here, Bulan." And in that instant, the air around her would grow still, like a held breath. The line between life and memory blurred, and for a moment, they were together again. The howl faded slowly, but the peace it left behind was deep and lasting. The forest was no longer silent, it was singing. Years passed. The story of the woman and the wolf became legend in the valley. Children whispered about the guardian of the forest, a silver wolf that watched over those who showed kindness to animals and punished those who hunted for sport. They said the spirit of the wolf walked beside an old woman with gentle eyes, and that when the moon was full, their shadows merged into one. Some swore they saw her smile at the edge of the forest before disappearing into the mist. In truth, no one ever found her body. Only her cottage remained, quiet, surrounded by flowers and paw prints that never faded. The forest had reclaimed its own, and their story lived on forever in the wind. The cottage stood empty, vines curling around its wooden frame, yet it never looked abandoned, only at peace. Birds nested on the windowsill, and wildflowers grew where footsteps once fell. Travelers passing by often felt something strange, a sense of calm, as though unseen eyes watched over them kindly. The air always smelled faintly of jasmine and rain. Deep within the trees, a faint silver shape moved at dusk. Silent, graceful, and unafraid, the forest remembered its guardian. Years later, a young shepherd boy wandered too far into the woods, chasing a lost lamb. Night fell fast, and he began to cry, calling for help. Then, out of the fog, a wolf appeared, tall, silver-furred, its eyes glowing softly. The boy froze in fear, but the wolf only turned, glancing back as if beckoning him to follow. Step by trembling step, the boy obeyed. When he finally emerged at the forest's edge, he saw the lights of his village ahead, and the wolf was gone. Only a trail of paw prints led back into the dark. The boy told his story to the elders, who exchanged knowing glances. "You've met the guardian of the valley," one said. "They say she once lived here, an old woman who loved a wolf like her own child." The boy's eyes widened. "A woman?" he asked. The elder nodded. "Yes. Some say her spirit became one with his. Together they keep the forest safe." From then on, the villagers stopped fearing the howls at night. Instead, they listened in silence, as if hearing an ancient lullaby carried on the wind. On certain nights, when the moon was full, silver light would spill across the valley in strange patterns, shapes like paw prints glowing faintly on the grass. The villagers began calling them moon marks. No matter how often the rain fell, the marks never faded. They appeared near the river, the fields, and sometimes on the doorsteps of those who were kind. To the children, it became a game. To the elders, it was a blessing. But to those who remembered the story, it was a sign. Bulan was still watching. The old hunter who had once sought Bulan grew frail with age. His eyes, once sharp, were clouded now with regret. Every night, he sat by his fire, haunted by memories of the shot that had changed everything. One evening, he limped into the forest, hoping to face whatever ghost awaited him. "If you can hear me," he whispered, "I am sorry." The trees swayed, and the air turned cool. In the shadows, two silver eyes appeared, calm and forgiving. The old man wept, sinking to his knees. By morning his body was found beneath the old oak, peaceful, a faint smile on his face. As decades passed, travelers who entered the valley often spoke of the forest's strange stillness. "It listens," they would say. "It knows who you are." Those with pure hearts heard music in the wind, a soft hum that calmed their spirits. But those who came to harm or hunt felt uneasy, as if unseen eyes followed them. One poacher claimed he heard a voice whisper, "Leave." He ran, swearing never to return. The villagers knew better than to doubt him. One spring, a little girl moved into the valley with her mother. She had silver-gray eyes that gleamed whenever she smiled. She spent her days talking to birds, chasing butterflies, and wandering near the forest edge. Her mother often scolded her. "You'll get lost out there." But the girl would laugh. "No, Mama, the forest likes me." One evening, she returned home with a wildflower in her hand, a kind that hadn't bloomed in years. When asked where she found it, she said simply, "A big dog gave it to me." The village prospered, its people kinder, its land fertile. Every spring, the river shimmered brighter, and the crops grew taller than ever before. The elders said it was because the guardian blessed the valley. On the anniversary of the great storm, the villagers gathered to lay flowers at the edge of the forest. They didn't know who started the custom. It had simply always been done. When the petals touched the ground, a gentle breeze passed through, scattering them into the trees like whispers of gratitude. Somewhere deep inside, a wolf howled once, low, content, eternal. In the deepest part of the forest, beneath the same great tree where Laris had once wept, two shapes were sometimes seen under moonlight. One human, one wolf. They moved side by side, fading whenever someone drew near. The villagers who saw them swore they felt no fear, only awe. "They're still together," one said. "Not ghosts. Guardians. The legend grew that love, once pure enough, could defy death and become part of the world itself. Centuries later, the valley changed. New houses, new faces, but the forest remained untouched. Children still told the story of Laras and Bulan, the woman and the wolf who shared one heart. Some said that if you walked there at dawn, the mist would part to show paw prints leading beside your own. Others claimed the wind whispered your name if your soul was kind, and somewhere beyond human sight, where light and memory intertwine, a woman and a silver wolf walked together still, keepers of the forest, guardians of love beyond time.